Hi there, this is Bo.
And this is Jerry.
And this is Don't Insult My Intelligence.
It's the podcast that questions, challenges, and exposes things that just insult our intelligence.
And those things can come from anywhere. Politics, society, music, movies, television, wherever.
Yep, and we're going to talk about it all. And in most cases, it's probably going to piss some people off. Parents, be warned that this podcast is not for kids. It's PG-13 at best and a hard R at most other times.
A little background. Jerry and I have been friends since high school, and we've always thought and lived a little outside of the norm, and we generally push the edge on most topics.
Mm-hmm. And when we were young, Bo's dad, when he would bust us doing stuff, as dads will do, when we tried to argue any kind of BS explanation to him, he would just stop and stare us straight in the face and just say, "Don't insult my intelligence."
Yeah, that was one of his most frequent sayings, so we heard that quite a bit growing up.
So we thought it'd make a great podcast concept, and here it is.
So here we go.
Don't insult my intelligence.
Let's see, so what we're going to talk about today is the fact that a lot of people think, or you hear a lot of people say, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. It's a common theme. You hear people say that all the time. You're really insulting our intelligence by saying that, because the actual facts and statistics in lots of different categories really show you the exact opposite.
That's right.
That the world culturally, from a human being perspective, is really not getting worse. It's actually getting better.
Yep.
And that we're probably in the safest and most prosperous time to be alive as a human.
Right. Yeah, throughout history.
In
Absolutely.
general. Yeah. And so there's lots of different information out there on this, and there's just a lot of reasons I think folks think that it's not as good as it used to be. Mm-hmm. And I think people use their own experience to kind of misrepresent what's really happening across the globe and across the country. And in the United States, we're kind of guilty of being biased.
Sure.
You know, and we want to apply like the United States experience to the rest of the world, and
right.
We're really in the minority, you know, on a global scale.
Right.
You know, we're a small percentage of the global population. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we are there.
Yeah.
So, and I've got a bunch of facts, but I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Fast before we dig into the facts.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, I think, especially, again, when just in talking to people or reading anybody's comments on social media, you do get the impression that everybody feels like the world is in this. I mean, I've literally heard them say and seen what they've posted where the world is going to hell. Like everything is so much worse and life is horrible. And that's just not true. I mean, there's, maybe what they want out of life is going to hell in a handbasket, but the world's not.
Yeah, like what do you mean? Like, what's an example of that? Like when you say that?
Well, like the political climate. It's like there's this, there's that. People aren't. It's just because they're not happy with the situation, right? And so it's like, and not to say that the situation's good, but it's not going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, nobody's blowing nations up. Nuclear bombs have not been let off. I mean. Right. But you would think, listening to some people, that that's like one step away, that we're right there. And that's just not going to happen. I mean, right. It's not. I mean, to example, people want to talk all day long about that little zipperhead in North Korea, right?
Right.
It's like, look, I mean, he seems like an idiot, and he probably is a loose cannon, but he still can't be completely crazy. I don't care what he's developed. All he's doing is developing things to try to start to get to a playing field to keep us at check. He's not building it going, all I need is one that goes 10 more miles and then I'm decimating everything. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, because that would be, it gets back to that whole mutually assured destruction. Because right. if we could have, trust me, I believe that if an advanced nation could have figured out how to use nuclear weapons, we would have already done it.
Yeah, sure.
Because it is the most cost-effective way to obliterate your enemy. Whoa. However, the blowback is so substantial, you're just shooting your own foot off.
That's it.
You know, but it's that long-term illness that kills you over years and years and years.
Right.
You know, because really there's some interesting studies that have been done on the effects that us bombing Hiroshima have had over the world economy. You know, that it was really not a smart thing for us to do.
Sure.
In the long term, in hindsight.
Right.
But, so North Korea, there is no way that them launching a nuke would serve any purpose for them at all, because we would nuke them because we would destroy parts of Russia. We would wipe out South Korea, which we probably do more business with these days. The only country we do more business with is China. And South Korea. But think about all the stuff that comes from Korea. Samsung televisions, all the Android phones, all the computer monitors. Like, I think 50% of the world's computer motherboards are made in Korea.
Right.
South Korea.
Right.
So there's no way we're dropping anything in North Korea.
Right.
We're going to go in there, if at all, the worst cases, we'll go in there with military.
Sure.
And devastate them. And even that will affect that will have a substantial impact on our economy if we go into North Korea, because it's going to ruin shit in South Korea, which is going to impact us, because I don't think people realize how much stuff we get from South Korea.
Well, right. And, yes, that would be the logical thing we would do militarily, right?
Yep.
But not even the blowback on, I mean, if North Korea, like I said, the man can't be that stupid.
Right.
It's not even just the fear of the U.S. If he were to shoot a missile off and actually, at us, whether it be us, our territories,
or Japan,
whatever, or our allies, right?
Or South Korea.
The global backlash he's going to get.
It's going to be bad. And I think really the only thing there, to get us back on track, the only thing there, I think what he's doing is he's going to use it as a bargaining chip to get better resources. I think what the real thing is they want more stuff from China at a better price or whatever. They want a better trade deal with China.
Right.
And that's probably what's going to end up happening. That would be my prediction. I heard somebody talking about it that was pretty smart, and they said that's really the only thing in play. Because that's what they want. Because they're being restricted trade because of their non-participation in all these other global things that we want them to do. So they're like, no, you got to play nice. You got to put on your big boy pants, play nice in the world, or you don't get the goodies.
Right.
At the end of the day, and they want the goodies, but they don't want to put on their big boy pants.
Exactly. But that being said, so the hell on the handbasket thing is people are like gloom and doom.
Yes.
We're not going to have a nuclear war.
Right. Not to say that he might launch some nuke, but there's no way we can retaliate against it. There's just, it's not feasible.
And even if he did.
Yeah.
It would cause tremendous devastation, but that would be the last thing he does.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
and then we're going to go in there and it's going to be nasty. Okay, so really that's about the only real thing I guess you could really say might actually happen right now. Who knows? I mean, I guess, Turkey and India are always, Pakistan and India are always, seem to be on the brink of war forever. But
the whole Israel situation, I mean, but that's been going on for how many years? I mean,
forever. Okay. So, to get more into the facts, are people, I saw this amazing TED Talk, okay, and you watched a little bit of it, and there's a whole series of them, and I just flipped off of it, but let me give you these guys' names just to give them the credit, and it's really, really well done. It's this father and son scientific team from Sweden, Hans and Ola Rosling, and they have taken a couple hundred years in some categories and 50 years in other categories of data that's provided by the United Nations about all these stats around the world, and what they're basically showing you here is in almost every category that you can track, statistics about quality of life, about prosperity, about health, longevity has all significantly increased or skews to the positive over time.
Right.
And the interesting thing that they do is when they survey people about it, everyone believes the opposite.
That's right.
So they have this great slide, and I will put a link to it in our show notes to this, that shows where they ask questions on deaths from natural disasters, right? So they ask people, since 1900s, have deaths from natural disasters increased, stayed about the same, or decreased? Okay, so they asked, they surveyed people in Sweden, and I think it was 13% chose that they've gone down. Okay, and the answer is yes, they have gone down. So that means 87% chose either that stayed the same or gotten worse.
It's wrong.
Okay, and it's wrong. So 87% of the population was wrong, and only 13% was right.
Right.
So then they surveyed the people at the TED conference. Now, if you don't know about TED, it's technology, entertainment, and I forget what the D stands for in TED. Technology, entertainment, and development.
Development.
Who knows? But it's all about technology and about making the world a better place. So you would think the people at the TED conference might be a little more up to speed
Right.
on these issues, and as it turns out, no, they weren't. Because only 30% of those people got the actually correct answer.
Well, they were better than Swedes.
Better than Swedes, yes. And in general, so almost twice, or more than twice, than Switzerland,
right.
General population. Or Sweden, rather. But then he went to a zoo and had chimpanzees randomly answer the question, and they got 33% right. So the chimpanzees beat the TED audience.
Yep.
So what it's showing is that people have a false understanding of what's going on in the world,
right,
for lots of different reasons, and we'll get into those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so before we do that, I want to talk about some of the stats and kind of get your reactions to some of the stats.
Sure.
Okay. So, all right. So one of the big things that they did is they talked about the income gap and prosperity. Okay. So I'm going to put a link to these because this gets a little bit involved, but I think it's important. So over the last 50 years, so we're talking about from 1967. All right, in 1967, there were 3 billion people in the world. Okay, and so 2 billion of those people existed on $1 a day, or right in that equivalent amount. Mm-hmm. So at the poverty line. So that is 66% of the world in 1967 was at the poverty line or lower. Okay? 34% of the world, or 1 billion people, so 2 billion people were in poverty, 1 billion people were above the poverty line, existed on $10 or more a day. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that's kind of where we were. And most of those people in the, I guess, wealth part of it were in North America, Europe, and Japan.
Right.
Okay. The rest of the world was in the developing countries, and you got to think this is 1967, so the developing world was a whole lot bigger than it is today.
That's right.
Right. Also, there were 4 billion less people in the world.
Right.
50 years ago.
Right.
Okay. So that's something to think about. So then, if you look at it today, that's still 1 billion people are still in that $10 a day or less category. Mm-hmm. So that drops it out. So if you look at that from a percentage perspective, because now there's 7 billion people in the world, that's only 14% from 66%.
Right.
Okay? Now, it's still 1 billion people, but it's 1 billion from out of 7 billion and not 1 billion out of 3 billion.
Correct.
Okay? So there are 6 more billion people in the world who are better off than the original 1 billion. Okay, now I'm generalizing a lot here, and there's a lot of individual stories, and then there's certainly people that are at horrible scenarios. But that right there shows you that in general the world is way, way better off. And then the other thing is people talk about the money gap, the gap between the rich and the poor. That's really in that 1 billion of the people that make the most money. So really, when you look at these stats, that's $30,000 a year. So that's $10. That's $100 a day or more is what you make. So that's around $30,000 to $40,000 US a year.
Right.
Okay. So if you're in that category, which in the United States, that's not a lot of money. It's tough to live on $30,000 a year. You're scraping by. Okay. You're in the lower income bracket.
Right.
But in the world, you're in the highest income bracket. Okay, compared to the rest of the world. Right, but in other parts of the world, you don't need that much money to live. You can live it's expensive to live in the nicest, in the more developed parts of the world. Okay, so what that means is in 1967, there was a big gap. There really wasn't a middle income. It was poor and rich in 1967, but today, that's all you hear about, at least in America, is the wealthy and the poor. Right?
Sure.
And the middle class is disappearing. Maybe in some aspect, but it's really not. It's really how you define what the middle class is. On a global scale, there's a giant middle class. Most of the people are in the middle.
Well, and that's, honestly, let's get to... That's part of the problem, like you were saying, with personal bias, right? Mm-hmm. Part of it also is it's not just personal bias, it's us as Americans.
Right.
More so than anything. It's like the ugly American thing, right?
Sure.
Because we feel, and we've built up a society where, it does cost a lot.
Right.
But and so if you're skewing it to that, if somebody's like, oh, I'm poor, I'm not making this, I'm not making that, but so-and-so is this and so-and-so is that. It's like, okay, maybe in America, maybe on your block, maybe in your little circle. But absolutely, when everybody's like the world is ruined, it's not ruined. Right. I mean, you're actually, if you were to transplant yourself and the wealth that you don't think you have, but you do have, and plop yourself in a different part of the world, you'd be rich.
Yes. You can, if you could move to Thailand.
Oh, yeah.
You can live like a king on $30,000.
Yeah.
Assuming you could have the same job. And I'm one of those people. I could probably move to Thailand, keep my job in America, do it on virtual. I do most of my job virtually anyway.
Right.
And man, I would be like a baller in Thailand.
Yeah. Right.
So, but you're exactly right. That's what it is. It's really hard for us to get beyond our bias in the United States. And that's not bad. It's just kind of what it is.
It is.
I mean, it's our life we live. Everybody lives the life they lead. Everybody's baseline of what you experience every day is what it is. And that's another thing I want to get to a little bit later. Even that said, everybody's baseline is what you live. People still have this crazy view of reality, like you can't leave your house or you're going to get killed.
Right.
And it's just so not true.
Right.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So today, back to the distribution of wealth. 1 billion people make $100 or more a day, or live on that, spend that a day, right? On average. And then 1 billion people still make $1 or less a day.
10, right? Isn't it 10?
No, sorry, $10 or less a day, yes. So everyone else is in the middle. It's pretty evenly distributed. So it's like 14% as you chop it down into the $20 to $40 a day versus and then on the net. So the thing is, when you graph it, it's a bell curve, and most people are in the middle. There is not this giant gap.
Right.
The giant gap that America wants to talk about is the gap between the really wealthy and the middle class. That's what they want to talk about.
And they do. And here's the thing, too, that I think I want, talking about this, if you're looking at it on a global scale.
Right.
That's the other problem that I think Americans forget is what they like to deem the 1%, which cracks me up because, like you said, is it truly 1%? I think that number's wrong.
No, it's not the 1%. It's the 0.001%.
Exactly.
We're in the 14%.
Right.
And actually, most Americans, make more than $30,000 a year, so you're really in the 5%.
That's right. But the supposed 1%. Here's the deal, and I know there are some, but if you were to if you could take the 1% and pinpoint it. The mass majority of that 1% is in America.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to understand, it's like, oh, look, these 50 people are billionaires. It's like, okay, again, it's like, you might be upset about that. And you think it's unfortunate, but really it's not to me, because if you think it's unfortunate, then you're saying it's unfortunate where you live.
Right.
And you shouldn't say that, because America is amazing. I mean,
Yes,
it's like...
it really is. Yep.
I mean, it's amazing, and it proves it right there, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't have that amount of wealth in one country.
Because you also got to think about it, because when you're talking about, like, what are you really complaining about?
Right.
Right. They don't have the money, so that means you want the money for what? And the people that are complaining about it, you still live in the best conditions in the world.
Right.
Like, you have everything you need. A lot of the people that are saying, oh, well, the rich need this and we don't have this. Like, what do you not really have? You don't have a Rolls Royce. You don't have a private jet.
Right.
But everything else, most people have the necessities that they need.
I agree.
And now, that's a hugely privileged thing for me to say. A lot of people don't have what they need. A lot of people struggle and scrape by. Okay? But I'm talking about most people in America. You're complaining about the level of luxury that you have.
Right.
It seems to me the people with the most energy around it are like they want the Mercedes,
right,
not the Audi. You know what I mean? They want, or whatever, maybe that's they want the Bentley, or they want the Maserati.
Right.
You know, they want the M class, you know.
Well, right. It's not like the guy who's like, I just want a sandwich.
Right.
Versus,
totally different.
And that's messed up too, because, and this is something we haven't looked up. We don't know the numbers on this. But you look at the percentage of, well, first off, I guess, it cracks me up. What is it that the normal American society deems the 1% wealthy? Where is that wealth number? When does it start?
Oh, yeah, right.
Is it $1 million? What is it? You know, I mean... Because to somebody it might be $100,000. To somebody it's $1 million.
It's probably like, I would have to, if I had to throw a dart at it, it'd probably be like the 50 million puts you in that big bucket, right? Because $1 million, a lot of people are worth $1 million.
But my point is that's where we're skewed and biased, because you have the one person. You're right. You have the guy who has the high end Audi, who wants the Bentley, right? But then you have the guy who has the Malibu, who wants the Mercedes, right? And it's like, to him the Mercedes guy is in that 1%, but he's not.
Right.
I mean, globally, he's not.
Right. And then most of the world, a Malibu would be the greatest thing they ever had.
Sure, a car at all. I mean, but then there's the other thing. It's like, I don't know the number, but the number, and I might be wrong, but this is just my opinion. The number of what supposedly is deemed of the super wealthy, this 1%. It's, how is that? I mean, I'd like to know, what's the number of the pure poverty stricken? And when I say that, I mean like the homeless, who what you have is what you can carry in your arms to an alley every night. The number might be roughly the same. You have a small percentage of this as opposed to the same percentage.
It's going to fall in that 1 billion number.
But I'm saying
across the world.
The 1% of the super wealthy, I wouldn't be shocked if we only have the 1% of the incredibly destitute.
Sure.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying there are people who are struggling to make their bills. I'm talking about people who don't even have a position to pay a bill.
Well, right. I think that's what that number represents. It's that lower bottom, that 1 billion. There's 1 billion people, according to these two guys' study. There's 1 people that live in unacceptable poverty.
Right, and that would be right, and that's what that would be. Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So obviously in America we have it way better than we realize.
Absolutely.
It's not going to hell in a handbasket.
No.
All right, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to say about that. So again, globally, okay, back in the 60s, all these numbers were less than 50%. Okay, that I'm getting ready to talk about. And really what causes poverty is large families, short lifespan, okay, and infant mortality, because people feel like they have to have babies to have a workforce to earn income for their family. Okay, and that model is destructive. It self-destructs. It does not grow. It does not sustain. It just causes more of the conditions that they're trying to get out of.
Right.
Okay. So the goal is to have 2 to 3 child families, and your lifespan increases, where the children aren't needed as income earners.
Correct.
You know, they're needed to go into the workforce in general, into society, not into just going and fending for your family. They're not a commodity to your family.
Right.
You know, they're an asset to your family, you know.
You know, and
So,
real quick, on speaking on that, I know we didn't discuss this before, but this is a good, I feel, and it plays into the longevity, right? The life expectancy.
Right.
Is before, what you're talking about is more kids, more worker bees in the family unit
yes.
to help
Yep.
offset costs and to create more money.
Yeah, just to pick more food, beg
whatever
for more
you
money.
do, right.
Yes, whatever it was.
Where
yes.
now, it's almost like, because of the life expectancy of humans, or especially in this country,
right.
you need them. It's almost like you need the children at a much later date. Potentially, you grow older. You know you need. Oh, I have my Social Security. Well, no one expected you to live to 97 years old, right? So it's like you might have to have a little help.
That is something that we're going to have to deal with. Okay, so, but back in 50 years ago, over 50% of the world was in that model, meaning that people had huge families, low life expectancy, very low quality of life, much more poverty. It goes back to that. You know, where 66% of the world was in poverty.
Right.
Okay, because they had that model. Now, and then, so today, and then all the other things that go along with that. Women weren't being educated, so really all they could do is either be manual labor or be mothers, baby factories.
Right, housewives.
Right? And then less medical care was given, less children were vaccinated, you know, all that kind of stuff. So now... So you switch to today, 80% of the world is in that 2 to 3 children family model. Less children, longer lifespan. 80% of the world participates in vaccinating kids against the most communicable and contagious diseases.
Right.
And 80% of the world, women go to school and become educated so they can be an equal part of the workforce and not just baby machines.
Right.
Right? So all those three things together contribute to this increase in lifespan, which is also what they attribute to, in 50 years, 4 billion additional people, you know, being born. Because the interesting statistic is, and this is another thing that chimps get right more than people when they ask this question, is, are more people being born or less people being born, or the same amount of people being born every year? And the answer is the same amount of people are being born every year. And and it's actually kind of dipping down and down a little bit. But the reason that there's so many more people is because everyone is living longer.
Right, absolutely.
Because of technology, because of vaccinations, and because of better living condition, and less people dying.
Right.
So really that life expectancy is also going up. And then you have to look at what's life expectancy. So really, when you look at it, people aren't really, we're living a little bit longer year to year, decade to decade, but we're not making these giant leaps in it. Because what's happening is less people are dying young. And that is where all the population explosion comes from. So we have whacked out infant mortality rates significantly in the last 50 years. So, and that's what kills the life expectancy average. So when 30% of babies die, life expectancy drops down into the 60s and 50s. But when only 10% of infant mortality rate, it jumps back up. So now we're below 10% infant mortality across the board. We have a extra 4 billion people in the world compared to 50 years ago because of that. Because those babies didn't die, they lived. And now they're adults having babies. Right. So it that's the model that happens. So there we are. So for that piece of population and income distribution, it is leaps and bounds better than it was 50 years ago.
Sure, of course it is.
So, and maybe just we don't see that as much in America because we're already in the top part of it.
Right.
So the view from the good seats is still pretty damn good, and we're harsh critics over the luxury life that we have.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous.
Okay. So, so then the next thing, I think, the next category on that is violent crime. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing that, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. You can't walk down the street. It's not safe.
Right. You look over your shoulder everywhere you go.
Horse shit. Right? So, really the big statistic that's out there, and this is I got this from newscientist.com, and they're referencing a larger study, and it's all over. This is not hard to find this data. So since 1995, violent crime is down 66% globally. 66%.
And that's only from 95.
That's from 95, yes. And there was for whatever reason, there was an increase in violent crime from the 60s through the 90s. So 60s, 70s, 80s, globally, there was a spike in violent crime. But it has dropped since then, 66%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about why. But that right there, that's a huge stat.
Well, and again, I want everybody to remember, when you're listening to this and in your head you're going violent crime, again, he said globally, not in the U.S., not strictly in the U.S.
Not strictly in the U.S., but
that's the problem.
U.S. is a big part of that number.
I know, but that's the problem. People hear what we're saying, and I think they're going to continuously forget because we're very self-centered that it's U.S.-based. This is globally.
Yep. The world, because that's what I'm talking about. The world is not going to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
The world is great. So, and we'll talk about America too if you want. But, so there's some pretty consistent thinking on why this is occurring. Okay, probably the biggest reason, and I'll kind of go maybe in what the impact is the first one is just technology.
Sure.
Okay, so really, and they call it social control technologies. So, and what falls into that is video surveillance, security cameras, and the ability to use that data quickly, right? As what's really increased. Think about it since the 90s. Back in the 80s in America, at least there were video cameras, but it was the store clerk had to change them out. You had to take a VHS tape out and put it in.
Sure.
It just wasn't easy to use that data, but now it's all computerized and everything. It's
and they weren't a dime a dozen.
Right.
I mean, if they were, we would have gotten caught with a lot of stuff.
Oh, I know. Yes.
But,
yes. Yes. Probably the reason both of us are not in prison is because
we grew up where
we were
in the Stone Ages
before our time. Right. So, or after our time. But so that's what most experts believe is the main reason is that criminals are deterred these days because they feel that I'm going to get recorded, I'm going to get caught.
Oh yeah.
I'm either going to be prevented from doing it, prevented from escaping, or I'm going to be easily caught down the road. Unless I have some master escape plan.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, there's always isolated situations. But I know earlier we were discussing this, and just off the cuff, I'm like, the bank robbery. Well, give me a break. Of course, banks have cameras everywhere.
Yes.
But here's another thing. Look at the dude in Tampa,
right?
Within the last month, who was murdering people, and attacking people.
Oh yeah, in Florida, yeah.
And the thing is, granted, he got away with it for what, a week or two.
Yep.
But
they caught him.
And why? Because he wasn't in a bank. He's on the street. And there's camera footage everywhere showing him walking, doing this, doing that. It's it's, you're under surveillance all the time.
Yep. And that is a lot of people think that is really reducing violent crime. It is a huge deterrent.
Of course, it has to be.
So then the other probably largest effect is the increase in the last 50 years or 60 years of just governments moving to democracies.
Sure.
Because in general, a democracy is a safer, less violent place to live. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not a democracy, then what is the rule of law?
Right.
Right? Force. most of the time. Military, like they rule through violence.
Right.
So in most cases,
Sure.
Because most dictators or emperors or king that don't have a parliamentary system or some type of democracy,
Right.
they rule through.
Yeah, there's no
violence.
checks or balances, and they just
it's the Saddam Hussein model.
Right.
Right. So in 1950, there were 5 or 6 democracies in the world. And today, there are more than 50. More than half of the countries in the world are now democracies.
Yeah.
So that right there brings the level of violent crime just way down.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then in democracies, there's better rule of law, there's courts, there's due process, there's all that stuff that helps criminals get convicted.
Right.
All right. So then this newer one, which I kind of like, and it's going to be interesting to see the effect that was mentioned, is recent trends in anti-bullying, which started, the anti-bullying thing kind of started about 15 or 20 years ago, when in school, the feeling on bullying changed from, hey, it's a rite of passage, it helps you, become a man.
Kids will be kids, whatever.
It changed from that to, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't bully people. It's violent, and it's wrong. And now those kids from that generation, in most Western countries and in Asia, have now become adults and moved into the general population. So you have that foundation of being an asshole is wrong.
Right.
Because that's what it comes down to. When you're bullying someone, you're taking advantage, you're committing a crime, you're committing assault in most cases, and prior to the anti-bullying movement, it was reinforced. It was like, it's okay. It's not that bad. So if that's your baseline of, hey, it's not that bad to basically be a criminal, then guess what? It's not that bad to go be a criminal.
Right.
And for those people that might have been on the bubble, that have been that tendency to go one way or other, if you've learned that it's okay to do that shit, then you're going to have that.
Right.
More often. So I think and to me, that's a soft statistic. There's not good statistic, but I think that's worth a mention.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, well, no, because it's true. I mean, it's, you're right. I do believe that, there's always going to be bullying. That's because part of that is, let's be honest. The bulk of bullying is insecurity on
the part of the bully.
On the part of the bully, right?
You're trying to establish dominance.
And so that's always going to happen. But you're right. Because it's not like back in the 50s or the 60s where dad would be like, well, that'll build character for your child. It's like, now it's like, no, it's harmful. It's a problem. And it's just useless. There's really no place for it. So, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I certainly, I have a daughter in elementary school, and you know what? They have anti-bullying day. They have a couple things where, and then they have this, like, they have a bully process, where you can, if you feel like you're getting bullied, you don't even go to your teacher. You go straight to a person, one of the guidance counselors, and they have a whole thing on it. So it's really out there,
Yeah, it's good.
So, all right. So then I think the other thing people talk about in this topic, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, is natural disasters.
Sure.
Right? So, and the big one that I think gets a lot, so we already talked about did we talk about the actual numbers of people that die every year from natural disasters?
Yes.
We talked about people guessing about it.
Right.
Whether it's going down or up.
Right, okay. But we didn't go into numbers.
So I'll give you the actual statistics from the United Nations. Okay? And this goes back to our friends, our 2 Swedish scientists. Hold on. So going back to Hans Rosling again, our Swedish scientists, and again I'm going to put a link to their TED Talks because they're excellent. You really, really should. You'll really get a lot out of it if you watch these. There's like 4 or 5 of them. They're great. So they have data back to 1900. Okay, on these natural disasters, like they have good data on tracking deaths. So in 1900, and thereabout in that decade, about 500,000 people a year died in a natural disaster. Okay, whatever it might be, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, a tsunami, whatever. Okay, so that's it's a lot of people on an annual basis, but it's still a very small percentage. So that, because of technology and just understanding and being able to predict when these things occur and evacuate people and actually less people die, like being able to save people who were injured and people don't die from their injuries. Right. So this in the 2000s and 2010s, that's now down to 50,000 a year from 500,000. So a factor of 10 less a year. So more people in America die in car crashes than die globally from natural disasters.
Sure.
So natural disasters are not a significant factor in anyone's lives in the globe. Okay, at a global level. Yes, if you're one of the unlucky 50,000 that is there when the tsunami comes in, sorry, you just punched your card.
Sure.
Right? But you're 50,000 out of 7 billion.
And this is death, though.
This is death.
Right. We're not talking about people that are just affected by it. Right.
That's a different thing.
Right.
Okay, we're talking about death. We're talking about the world going to hell in a handbasket. Hell in a handbasket means people are dying.
Right.
In large numbers. And the fact about natural disasters is people are not dying in large numbers from natural disasters.
Right.
50,000 a year. More people die in car crashes just in America than that.
I agree. And so next, to segue from that, I think what you need to speak on is because we seem to think that it is worse, there are no more natural disasters now than there have been.
No.
It is a natural cycle.
On
some things. Earthquakes, not so much a cycle. Maybe,
it's kind of random.
Hurricanes, there is a cycle. These are weather patterns. I mean...
Yes. And people don't like to hear this one. So this one's going to be controversial. And so I've got some data here from one of the international weather tracking websites. And I'll have the exact one, but it's the Atlantic Herdat Storm Index. And it goes from 1878 through 2010. Okay? Sorry, that's what the scale is. And when you look at it, on average, there are from the 1880s into the 2010s, there were on average 15 or so hurricanes a year. And it goes up and down.
Hurricanes or storms?
Sorry, named tropical storms.
Right. Okay.
So that is inclusive
even less, right,
of hurricanes. Okay, on average, these big storms. All right. So now when I look at the chart, and again, I will post the chart and the link to this data. So in 1890. And they have a larger margin of error in the 1800s just because of the tracking, and they probably missed some storms.
Oh, sure.
And who knows, because it's the 1800s. There was a spike of 23 or 24 storms that year. Okay, that's in 1890 or so. Okay, so let's jump all the way forward to 2006. There were 28 storms. So 4 more than in 1890.
Right.
Okay. Now, is that a significant increase? Maybe on a hurricane scale, maybe it is, but that's just, you're still relatively there on the same number. Then,
right.
If you look at in 1930, there were 24. In 1970, there were 19. In 1995-ish, there were 23. So that's where we are. So there's not like one year there was 50.
And 1 year there was 5.
In 1 year there was 5. Well, yeah, there's some weird years.
Some small years.
Yeah, where there was 8
right.
here or there. But again...
But I guess the point is, it's not showing from the pattern an increasing amount year after year.
The trend line is flat.
Right.
It is not going up. It did not start low and going up. I mean, just hurricanes occur on some cycle. Now, the jury's still out on whether climate change or increase in temperature is increasing the intensity of these storms. Maybe that's true. I don't know. It's too soon to tell, I guess, on that. But there's certainly not statistically or significantly more storms now than there was over 100 years ago.
Right. And, my opinion of that, I don't agree. I know people are going to say, oh, no, climate change is causing this. Honestly, the intensity of the storm, I mean, I remember before we were born, my parents talking about storms that were horrible. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I think really it's not so, I mean, it is the intensity, but it's really more the impact of where it hits and what damage it causes as opposed to just the intensity. Because,
right.
That's, to me, that's just a bunch of horse shit. I mean, honestly, that's my opinion. I know people are going to get pissed off who want to scream that, the climate, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Well, whatever.
The data doesn't say that.
That's right.
And that's what that's kind of the whole point.
Right.
Is the data says the opposite.
That's right.
So this is one where, well, it's not getting better. And I guess on the hurricane scale, better would be no hurricanes. Be great not to have any.
Sure.
So this one, it's not getting better, but it's certainly not significantly getting worse.
No.
So
I think it's just a normal, natural weather cycle, to be honest with you.
It appears that way over
Right.
the last 100 years. Now, I'm sure that there are people that can debunk all this data and get all in it, but I'm going with what we got here.
Right, of course.
So, anyway. So that's the thing on hurricanes. So we seem to be okay on hurricanes. So just in general, so what we're looking at here is, why do people have this weird view? Why do people like to say, oh my God, the world's so horrible, everything's bad,
Right.
Because a lot of times, like the situation I see is, you see a person say that, or you read where someone says that on social media or somewhere, and in most cases, that person then left their nice house in their climate-controlled environment, put on their really nice clothes to protect them from the elements, put on their polarized sunglasses,
Right.
jumped in their awesomely safe vehicle, drove to some store to have their imported, 3-day food supply given to them, already cooked, already prepared, and enjoyed, and then came back. Mm-hmm. And they weren't attacked. They weren't threatened in any way. Nothing happened to them.
Yeah.
And they were completely safe.
Act of God didn't crush them in their path.
They weren't scooped up by a tornado. An earthquake didn't happen, and they didn't have a violent crime attached to them.
And seemingly they have the money to afford all these things.
Exactly.
So
what is so bad about the world? And I really think it's our skewed privilege, and just, at least in America,
you're right,
our yearning to have more luxury that we want to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And maybe it's even rationalization or justification to kind of do what we continue to do, because I need to stay here in my little bubble,
right?
So I don't become a statistic,
right? Well, here's a good point. I was just thinking, and I know we're trying to base it off of the phrasing. The phrasing is, "World's going to hell in a handbasket."
Right.
So we're coming to you with facts and data that are global.
Sure.
But it's the trend in this conversation. He keeps coming back to America because we're self-absorbed, and it's ridiculous. But part of that too, like we hadn't talked about, which I didn't think about earlier, is like, again, the social aspect. Well, actually, I'd be shocked. I would like to know. Because all we know, that's the thing too, all we know is what we know from being in America. What we hear from Americans, what we read from Americans. I don't know that somebody in the Netherlands really thinks the world is going to hell in a handbasket. They might not be, right?
I don't know. It seems like if the stuff from Sweden holds up, I think a lot of people have the same.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
well, you're right. I mean, I guess if you're going to ask
us, in Sweden they got it pretty good. But they still don't think that way.
But hold on. If you ask, they're asking specific questions. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a general attitude.
Right.
I don't know if they go about their day-to-day life thinking, oh, the world is ruined. You know, it's like, I don't know that they think that. Well, I think if somebody said, do you think there's more earthquakes now? Then, okay, I might answer yes. And I'm not saying they don't. I just don't know. Yeah. I don't live in that world. Yeah. But the part that I think we haven't hit on, at least in here in America, is the social supposed inequality. Right, that pisses me off more than anything. In the sense, and we've talked about this individually.
Yeah,
before.
tell me some more about that. What do you mean by?
Well, okay, so especially in our country, racism is rampant. Mm-hmm. Is it?
Right.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not saying. You know what? There's always going to be racism, at least within our lifetime.
Yeah.
At some point in time, there probably won't be, but in our lifetime, there is. It's just that's the way it is. But every year, it's lessened. And like I've always said, it's like no one can tell me that our country is more racially divided now than it was 100 years ago. You just can't tell me that.
No way.
And every year, I can almost guarantee you, I don't know how you could prove a study like that because it's going off of children learning different things all the time.
Right.
But I just know going off of my own children.
It's almost kind of the same. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
On your children, because I probably feel exactly the same way, but it's almost the same. It's almost the same news bias that we need to talk about with why people think
it is.
You know what I'm saying? Because I think the reality is yes, the United States is way, way, way less racist. Now, it's easy for me to say that as a white person. But what I see, what you can observe, I mean, good grief, we elected a black president.
Right.
Okay, that right there, that's huge. Okay, so there's the main two characters in the largest grossing movie right now, the latest Star Wars movie. The romantic interest is a black male and a white female.
Right.
Hugging at the end, and it's like nobody bats an eye. Right? Because that is now socially accepted. That is a gigantic leap forward in cultural progress.
Absolutely.
But what we hear about, the news sensationalism, is we hear about more racist acts today because they're news now.
Sure.
Right? In our social media podcast, we talked about the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
Right? At a max, that's 10,000 to 20,000 members. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is a super small part, and their numbers are declining every year. Right. So it's that part of the world is dying away.
Right.
But you hear about it. They go out and do something. They go out and make a protest, and boom, it's national news for a week, and then that feeds the oh my God, we're so racist.
Look, that and so my thing is, and I know you're jumping into the news portion of why this is. And I understand that, but even take that out of the equation, right? I'm just saying in general. And when you were like, you're saying this as a white person. I don't care what color you are. That's BS. There's no rational thinking person that can tell me. You can't. I'm not saying everything I'm not sitting here claiming everything is 100% fair across the board for every sect of person.
No.
I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is racism is not worse now. It's probably the best it's ever been. I'm not talking about what you might read or what you might see. I'm just saying in general, it is. Yes. And you can't, and I don't care what color you are, you can't dispute it. And I'm not going to have anybody tell me, well, you're a white man saying that. You're goddamn right I'm a white man saying it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say it because it's a goddamn fact.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's a black president. There are black CEOs.
Yes.
And guess what? I won't even go back 100 years. I'll go back 30.
Yep.
That shit didn't happen like that. So I don't want to hear that bullshit.
Yeah.
And it goes the same for me with every single type of group, any minority group, women, blacks, anything. It's all the same. It's like, I'm not saying it's perfect for everybody, but it in no way, shape, or form on any of this is it worse than it was yesterday. It's not.
I agree.
I mean, that's bullshit.
It can be. I mean, because when I was a kid, my family's restaurant still had, they didn't have it, but they physically still had separate bathrooms for white and colored.
Right.
That restaurant in the South, it was still there. There were double water fountains in the kitchen. There were 2 bathrooms in the kitchen. Okay? And I remember asking why. And, my granddad telling me, well, that's the way it used to be. Now, that was in 1975.
Right.
Okay? Now, try to do that today. You can't do that today.
That's right.
That's the thing. It is not perfect. There is still racism. There is still discrimination. People are not given the same opportunities because of their race, sex, religion, creed, whatever. But it is way less than it used to be. It is not integrated into the fabric of the government anymore.
It is
All
not.
right, so we're getting off that. So that part of the world is also getting better. Elements of society. So I don't want to jump head first into the race.
Yeah.
So to get us back to where do these views come from? Okay, so I think that there's a couple things there, and we've already talked about personal bias. Like we talked about the you're super safe, and then something happens to you. Like let's say you get carjacked, or let's say you get your mugged or your wallet stolen, or identity theft. Well, the world's going to hell in a bananas. No, you were just a statistic. You were an outlier.
Right.
You could get struck by lightning. That doesn't mean that lightning storms are increasing. It just happened to happen to you.
Yep.
It's gonna happen to some people. It happens to thousands of people every day.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that that's happening across the board.
Right. Because it happened to you now. Everybody will experience this situation.
Yes. And you see that a lot. People hold on to these things that happen, these outlying events, and that skews their reality a lot of times for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it because a lot of times it was traumatic, or whatever. And so it affects you. You have post-traumatic stress disorder from whatever crazy thing happened to you. Whatever.
Right.
If you're in an earthquake, I get it. Then the other thing is there are outdated facts. So what's occurring in schools? The process of updating curriculum in schools takes too long. And that's just part of a broken system there where books are printed and not everywhere just uses computers that can be updated quickly.
Right.
Facts are updated and distributed way faster.
That's
it's
right.
Digital. Hard print media has a life cycle, and this day and age, facts and new data comes out much faster than we can get new books out into circulation.
That's true. But I will say on that one, again, because of the world we live in and technology and how it's made things better, I would almost think that in the next 10 years, that portion will be skewed down to almost nothing.
It's getting better and better. Again, another thing. That's another thing that's getting better and better.
Right.
I mean, because even in public schools, and again, this is really privileged of me to say, but my daughter goes to a public school in North Carolina, which does not have a great school system, in general. It's one of the lower ranked states always.
Right.
The actual county I'm in is one of not the greatest. I mean, it's actually kind of the black eye in North Carolina. I live near Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's not a great school system, but even her school, every classroom has Chromebooks.
Right.
They all have laptops.
Right.
So that what you're saying is that's getting better.
It's going to change.
Yes.
Within 10 years, I think that whole portion of why people think this, that will diminish.
Right.
The personal bias will not.
Yeah, that's going to be hard one.
The next one will not.
Right.
But this one will.
Yes, hopefully that will. The outdated facts. So facts and data, we're becoming more of an information society.
Absolutely.
So it's harder to hide the truth. It's harder to skew things. Things can be debunked, or at least questioned.
Right.
So then the next one is news bias, because that's probably the primary thing that creates this. What makes people believe all these things that just aren't true, and it's really, if it bleeds, it leads. It's if that thing in the news, and it's funny when you watch the TED Talk I want to link to, it's why do the chimps score better on these tests of predicting what the world is really like from the data, is because chimps don't watch the news.
Right. Right.
They just choose randomly.
Right.
But really, we hear about now, and you were talking about the one time we were talking about the news cycle, right? That also doesn't help these days. It's actually making it worse. Back in the mid 80s to late 90s, the news cycle was only a few hours a day.
Right.
It was in the morning, and then it was at night.
Right.
Now it's 24 hours.
Yep.
And now it's all the time on the internet, and now it's all over YouTube. So now there's this need to feed that monster. There's need for content all the time.
Right.
So anything that has a spark of sensationalism is a story. So you're hearing about shark attacks. For a while there, people thought that shark attacks were increasing. They're really not. The chance of getting bitten by a shark are minuscule.
Right.
But it's sensationalized. And it's all these things. So violent attacks, natural disasters, that stuff is all over the news, and that skews people's view of the world.
Of course it does. I mean, yeah, that's one of those things with, and unfortunately, like I said, that one isn't going to change.
Right.
That's going to increasingly get worse.
Yeah.
And all I can say is this. I mean, and the thing is, I think when people are like, I hate the news, a lot of people hate the news, meaning they hate to hear it. They hate to see it because it is all gloom and doom, right?
Yeah.
I hate it because it's not and again, I'm not, I know there's the whole fake news, jargon running around. I'm sure some outlets, depends on, how credible you are. Some's fake, some's not. But the one thing that does hold true is all of it's negative.
Right.
And what kills me is that the general population I hate this. They're like sheep.
Yeah.
You jump on the negative. It's like, but do you ever question? It's like, I mean, how many people have just sat there and watched the news just one night a week and go, God, did anything good happen in the world? Absolutely it did.
Sure.
Absolutely. More good than bad, probably.
Yeah.
But, nobody's talking about that because no one gives a shit to hear it.
And the thing is, it's an interesting trend. I think it's one of these things where I think the media companies have it wrong here. Because if you look at the most popular YouTube video ever, okay? This is kind of an interesting thing. And maybe it's been eclipsed now, but for the longest time, the most popular YouTube video was that little cat, where it was a cat video.
Right.
And it wasn't cat being killed or maimed or dying in an earthquake.
Right.
It was a cute little cat video that opened its paws and made a face when the person moved its finger, and did it over and over again. And that was the most popular YouTube video in the world because it made people happy.
Right. And yeah, it's funny, it's whatever.
And in general, the most popular YouTube videos are songs and things that make people happy.
Children doing something stupid, right?
Yes, people love that stuff. So, to me, the news might be more popular if they showed more of the good stuff going on and less of the bad stuff. I mean, but that might be an interesting experiment. I don't know, but
I think so.
YouTube, I think, seems to. Maybe that's a good litmus test for that.
I agree. Well, the news in general, we could almost have a podcast on that alone.
Yes.
Because, not only that, there's stuff also that it's just like this, the news chooses to report what they want to report.
Yeah.
And not only the issue of, they don't report the good so much, they always report more of the bad, but there's also, why are you not reporting things and this can come up in another podcast, hopefully that we'll have soon. But for instance, like, what's going on in Iraq? Does anyone in this country know?
Right.
We know we're still there. Yeah. And we're not all sitting in the damn desert drawing fucking shit with a stick. I mean, something's going on. Why do we never hear about it? Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind. Is it not popular? What's their reasoning? But the news is bullshit because it's not truly news. As far as I'm concerned, you have the good, the bad, and the indifferent, but you should be treating all of them equally in the media.
You got it. And you know what? I think that is going to be, so let's make sure we capture this. And I think we do need to do what happened to the news as kind of a theme.
I agree.
Because when you go back and look at it, like what happened to the Walter Cronkite level news? Because if you go back to the FCC, when TV became a thing,
right,
and the government had to say, okay, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do TV.
To regulate all this.
Right? Part of what was legislated into the laws around the FCC that controls the airwaves was you had to allow, if you were going to buy a bandwidth,
right,
that at the time it was the three big companies, ABC,
sure,
NBC, CBS, you had to dedicate a certain amount of time per week to news that was not revenue generated.
Right.
And all that has gone by the wayside.
Gone away.
Because all the news outlets are revenue generated. And why can't we not get back to that? Because, like, if you remember, like, ABC, I think, broke the Watergate scandal. They broke that. A major news took down the president.
Right.
Basically. That would never happen today.
No.
It could not be done.
Nope.
You know? It could not be done.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's
what happened to that?
Right. That's a story, and that is absolutely a podcast.
Yes.
In and of itself.
And that, I think that is the main thing, that news bias, coupled with the fact, with the bad data that we have, that we get as children, the news bias, and then our natural intuition of self-preservation.
Right.
Those three things kind of coupled together create in most people this, oh my God, the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
Right. I agree.
Right? So, okay. So we're at about an hour here.
Yeah.
So I think we've hit on this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good discussion. So really, don't insult our intelligence, please. The earth and the world, the human world,
right,
is not going to hell in a handbasket.
No.
We're safer than we've ever been. The wealth of the world is more equally distributed than it's ever been. Yes, there's still a small percentage that controls a whole lot of it.
Right.
But the rest of us have a lot. Okay?
Yeah.
There's no more natural disasters than there normally are. And there's no more hurricanes than there normally are. And violent crimes are down significantly in the last 25 years across the board.
Yeah.
And you are safe to go wherever you need to go.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah.
The most
statistically, you are safer than you've ever been.
Ever been. People are living longer than they've ever lived. And honestly, the most dangerous thing you do is get in your damn car.
Is a car.
That is the most dangerous thing you do. You increase your chance of dying 1,000% when you step in that car.
Right.
So just think about that.
I would say with this one, so look, hey, anybody who wants to on the message board, send in any feedback, any rebuttals on this one.
Because you're going to get some.
I am. I mean, but you know, the thing is, out of all the podcasts so far, this one, I'm really, for once, I'm not going to go at it cynically and sarcastically. And I'm going to be like, yeah, I want to hear, because there's something. I mean, this is such a broad one.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something we're not thinking of, and like we've talked about, I even told Bo, it's like, don't get me wrong, absolutely. If you subsect everything down, you can find something that is worse today than it was yesterday.
In its own, yeah, individually, sure.
Right, individually,
Sure.
But overall, in general, right, it's not. But I'd love to hear what people
Well,
write.
I'll give you one. Twinkies are worse today than they used to be.
Well, of course they are.
Twinkies used to be better.
Well, they took them away, for God's sake.
And now they're not as good.
And they're not the same.
Anymore,
No,
no.
they suck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can go on that kind of thing all day long. But, I mean, TV, well, no, actually, that's a whole different subject.
Yeah.
TV is better now. Except for sitcoms.
Yes.
That's the only avenue that sucks.
Well, whatever. That yes.
But we'll have a topic. We'll go on to that one at one point too.
Yeah.
But yeah, anybody that has stuff, please throw it at us because we would love to see. And you might with this one. Honestly, I think this is going to be an open-minded one where we'll go. Okay, let's really look at that.
Sure.
I mean, more so than let's say flat Earth. I'm not looking at shit for that. I mean, but yeah, this one, and even the social media, I'm not going to look at really as much as I would look at this. So yeah, throw stuff at us with this one. I'd love to sit there and contemplate it.
Absolutely. All right. Everybody's fine. The world is not ending. We're not going to die. Don't insult my intelligence.
Please, even though I am poor and those motherfuckers that have all the money piss me off.
Bye.
See ya.
You're not poor compared to people in fucking Africa.